All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today we're exploring a seriously fascinating piece of 19th century religious history that completely upended daily rules, spiritual laws, and social conduct. We're talking about the completion of the Bayán, a sacred text that essentially tried to engineer an entirely new, elevated way of living by mixing cosmic, mind-bending theology with the most practical, everyday stuff you can imagine.
We've got a lot of ground to cover today, so here's the roadmap. 1. The Bayán's final chapters. 2. Protecting the four elements. 3. Redefining spiritual purity. 4. Radical kindness and dignity. And finally, 5. The ultimate theological goal.
So, Part 1. The Bayán's final chapters.
Back in 1864, the author Ṣubh-i-Azal took on an absolutely monumental task. He stepped up to finish the Bab's original text, the Bayán. And he did this by translating some incredibly dense, esoteric theology into actual, practical guidance for everyday people. This wasn't just abstract philosophy, it was a manual written to shape everything from a community's economy to their deepest inner thoughts.
Now, the entire foundation of this book is built on a highly specific mathematical structure, and the magic number here is 19. The Bayán is meticulously built around it. If you multiply 19 by 19, you get 361. And in Arabic numerology, 361 translates to the phrase kullu shay, which means literally all things. This absolute obsession with structure and math is going to bleed into every single law we look at today.
Moving on to Part 2. Protecting the four elements.
These laws lay down a really radical baseline, both economically and spiritually, by strictly forbidding the commodification of nature. Earth, air, fire, and water were seen as boundless gifts from God, right? So buying and selling the raw elements themselves was totally off limits. But they made a really clever distinction. Charging a wage for the human labor of, say, transporting water or digging earth, that was perfectly fine. They separated the element itself from the labor required to move it, which was just a profound way of ensuring life's essential substances were never hoarded as mere commodities.
They viewed these natural elements as divine gifts, not commercial goods to be exploited for a quick buck. The text actually says, "What a pity if the substance of human life is sold for a worldly dinar, allowing a lowly creature to benefit from it. Nature was sacred. Access to it was a universal right, completely detached from the marketplace."
All right, Part 3. Redefining spiritual purity.
Imagine living in a society where you're bound by these strict, honestly, anxiety-inducing physical rituals. Back then, traditional practices required obsessive outward washing. Like you had to strictly avoid dogs or even a single stray animal hair, or else your prayers were considered invalid. But the Azal-Lali laws of the Bayán completely flipped that script. They came out and said, inner sincerity is what actually matters. Having a wet dog brush up against you, that absolutely does not ruin your connection to the divine.
The text argues that maintaining a pure heart is vastly more important than obsessing over physical dirt. I mean, what good is constantly washing your hands if your inner self is polluted by hypocrisy or cruelty, right? You can imagine what a massive psychological relief this was for followers. It freed them from that constant paranoid fear of accidental impurity and redirected all that energy toward their internal moral compass.
Which brings us to Part 4, Radical Kindness and Dignity.
This text laid down rapid-fire laws that were incredibly gentle for their time, demanding a really high standard of civilized conduct. We're talking an absolute ban on causing physical harm or verbal abuse. They even specified you couldn't strike an animal. It banned extreme emotional displays like tearing your clothes in grief. It made it strictly forbidden to ever burn a book, which is a massive statement on the sanctity of knowledge. And if people disagreed, they were required to debate using proofs and evidence. No physical force, no shouting matches.
There's this one powerful line that really captures the core ethos of their social harmony. You must never cause sadness to anyone at all. That is an incredible, overarching mandate. It elevates the law way beyond do not steal or do not hit into a strict active command against breaking another human being's heart.
To actively foster that kind of harmony, we return to our magic number, 19. Believers were commanded to host 19 people every single month to build community. And what's truly beautiful about this rule is that if a follower couldn't afford a big feast, they were told to simply offer water. The act of gathering and the spirit of hospitality were what mattered, not how expensive the meal was. That structural obsession with numbers extended straight into social law and inheritance, too. The ranks of inheritance were divided with mathematical precision, but notice how deliberately inclusive they are. It mandates guaranteed shares for spouses, mothers, and sisters, making sure female relatives were protected. Astonishingly, it even includes a guaranteed rank of inheritance for teachers, which just shows you how highly they valued education and guidance.
And this insistence on dignity applied to life's darkest moments too. Traditional mourning back then often involved tearing your clothing and striking yourself in anguish. But the Bayāni practices demanded that even in the face of absolute heartbreak, followers maintain composure. They completely forbade bodily harm during grief, commanding dignified patience instead. And they instituted a very specific waiting period of 90 to 95 days before remarrying. It ensured life moved forward, but with profound order and respect.
Okay, Part 5. The Ultimate Theological Goal.
So, what does this all mean? The crucial takeaway here is that being polite, staying clean, and protecting nature weren't just nice philosophical ideas. They were strict, urgent requirements so the community would be perfectly ready for a coming divine figure known as Him whom God shall make manifest. This was the ultimate promised leader, and every single rule in the Bayán was designed to prepare the followers' souls to recognize and serve this figure the absolute second he arrived.
Because this figure could theoretically show up at any moment, the followers had to live in a state of immaculate readiness. They were commanded to renew all outward possessions every 19 years, so nothing got decayed or stagnant. When the manifestation arrived, they were supposed to offer a crystal bottle of the most exquisite perfume. When they prayed, they were to prostrate only upon pure dust held beautifully inside a crystal vessel. The whole goal was to make their inward and outward selves a pure mirror, to perfectly reflect the divine light.
When you look back at Ṣubh-i-Azal's massive endeavor, you realize he wasn't just throwing arbitrary rules at the wall. He was trying to engineer society that lived in a constant, beautiful state of expectation. He envisioned a community elevated through culture, modesty, and intellectual debate, basically sitting on the edge of their seats, ready to welcome the divine with absolute perfection.
It really leaves us with a fascinating perspective on how linking cosmic theology to our daily habits can completely reshape what a society values. Think about it. If every daily rule you followed was designed solely to prepare you for a sudden divine encounter, how would it change the way you treat your neighbors tomorrow? It's an incredible thought experiment handed down from the 19th century, and it really makes you question the motivations behind our own daily routines. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the structures around you.